All right. Let's talk about some art studies. Let's figure out how to paint some water today. Okay. So today, as posted, we're going over how to study water, its movements, reflections, refractions, how to paint it, so on and so forth. So this picture that I have here is a picture of the Sweet Creek Trail in Oregon, and it's a picture by Rick Obst. Funny thing about this picture, I actually had to go through about like 20-minute deep dive into finding out who posted this photo, because when I was looking for reference photos, I saw this on just like some random downloadable website, but it didn't have the person who took the photo, and I wanted to give credit. You should always give credit on things that you use to study or anything that you're referencing and such, if you can. So I had to go find out. There's reverse image searching. Find Rick Obst had taken this photo. So we got the right thing. All right. So let's first start with talking about the flow of water. Now, water, like, there's a lot of stuff that goes along with it. And when you're painting or you're drawing, it's good to give, a sense of movement with water. Now, of course, you could just have like a river of sorts and, have your drawings of other things on the side of it. And that's fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But it doesn't really give a good sense of motion and life to water. So a good thing to study and to look at if you were looking to paint water and its movement, so on and so forth, is to see how it is flowing in life and see how you can interpret that in your work. Now I can see from this photo here, we're going to make some observations. And I'm going to make it in hopefully a color that can be more easily seen. Let's maybe make the stroke a little bit bigger. Let's do a different brush. How about that? Let's grab this one here. There we go. That's a bit better. All right. So, in looking at this photo, let's zoom in a little bit more. There we go. Okay. First thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to try to identify the horizon line. The reason why I'm doing that, at least in my mind, is that I want to keep in mind at all times the angle at which we are seeing things. So are we seeing things from the top down? Are we seeing things on its bottom side? Anything that is below the horizon line, we are looking down upon. Anything that is above the horizon line, or our line of sight area, are things that we're looking up at. So we're seeing the bottom of things. So just from the looks of it and how I can see kind of the tops of a lot of things going off into the background. Now, of course, these things in life could still be above us, and their surfaces are just sloped towards us. That is totally something that could be happening here, but I'm going to say, just for the purpose of us, studying and trying to get perspective down, we're going to say that the horizon line is right about here. Let's say that this right here is the horizon line. So let's actually write it off to the side. Give her some of that here. Let's go over here a little bit. I'll just say this area right here is the horizon line. I can definitely spell. So we have the horizon line there, this area here. It's going over. Let's put a little area right there. Okay. So everything else underneath that, which is kind of what we're focusing on, are things that we're looking down upon. And this will be important later as we're talking about things. So, okay, we have the horizon line. We know that we are looking down on this image. So let's now figure out what the flow is and how we're going to interpret that. A good thing to do in paintings, illustrations, your art in general, is to have kind of like a through line through your work or whatever your scene is. A through line is basically a line or, like a visual direction that takes you through an entire piece. So I could say that the through line for this image here will be starting back here, going through and zigzagging, creating this nice kind of visual zigzag pattern that we're seeing here with the water as it goes out of the photo. Having a through line is really good for just establishing how you can have... Waystick, welcome. My stream is still tagged as Cult of the Lamb. Oh, that's not good. Let's get that out of there. I think I just updated the tags. I think. But, even if it's still tagged as Cult of the Lamb, that's not a huge, big deal. Cult of the Lamb does have water running in it, so I think that should be fine. But anyway, it's gone? Great. Well, thank you for your assistance, Sig. Always on top of things. Appreciate you. Welcome. Okay, what was I talking about? So if you didn't see, Stick, so we're doing some studying on water right now. But anyway, talking about the through line, having a visual through line throughout the piece and giving good bits of like kind of back and forth motion, a way to direct the viewer through is important and creates good composition. So we have a through line established. I can see as we're going through here how the water is kind of cascading down in certain areas. And I want to take note of that because I don't want the water that I paint to be very static and going in one direction. I want to show that it is, cascading off of different points. I want to show that, there's 3 dimensions. I want to show that there's depth. There's other things in the water that's making it move the way that it moves. So we have that down that we're going to keep in the back of our minds. And so now let's talk about, let me make a new layer. Let's do a new layer. Let's take this one. We're just going to put the opacity down a bit. Still leave it though, or come back to it later. So the next thing that I am going to be keeping in mind and observing and taking a look at is next how the perspective lines, or how we can make perspective lines that go from the foreground to the background. That, hey 8-Bit, welcome. We're doing an art study today and I'm going over water. So these perspective lines that we're doing, we're going to observe them, see how things direct us from the foreground to the background. So what I mean by that is, as things are closer to you, especially in like water or landscapes and such, as things are closer to you, you'll notice that we have these diagonals or these lines that are going at an angle backwards towards the vanishing point, or that horizon line that we established before. So these help us in creating depth in our work. You'll notice that as we get further and further away from the foreground and closer to the background, things like these lines start to become a lot more horizontal until it is straight along with the vanishing line, or the horizon line. So this is a good thing to keep in mind while we're looking at studying things. In addition to, understanding that through line with whatever it is that we're working on, these perspective lines that we can put and we can just kind of add into the scenery, just to help us understand depth. All right, so talked about the through line, talked about the depth. Let me make a new layer. Let's bring the opacity down on that one. Okay, in this new layer, now with water, I want to keep in mind reflection and refraction. For those of you that are not aware, or may not know, so when it comes to water, let's say that these lines right here, these are two separate bodies of water. So refraction happens when the angle you are viewing into water is steep enough that the light passes down through the water and you can actually see, more of the bottom, especially if the area is more shallow. So refraction is the light passing through the water for you to be able to see more of what's going on underneath it. And reflection would be if you are looking at water or something from a shallower angle. So instead of looking more down upon it, if you're looking more across it, the light is going to be reflecting off the surface of the water. So you won't really be seeing a whole lot going on underneath. You'll instead just be seeing reflection off the top. Now, this goes back into what I was talking about before of understanding where the horizon line is and how our perspective is going to be, because, as we said, the horizon line here is at the top, and anything that is below the horizon line we are looking down upon. So we can use what we know about refraction and reflection to say, okay, I am looking down at this water, and the light is going more through it and not reflecting off of the top as much, so I can actually, and it's shallow enough that I can see a little bit more about what's going on underneath the water. So we have refracting light kind of going on here. We can see a little bit underneath here, kind of here. So we know underneath the water, we've got rocks, we got some like dirt and stuff going on underneath it. It's not just a plain reflection. There's stuff happening under there, and that is something that we want to capture. This helps us with our perspective in creating depth. If everything just had the same kind of reflective sheen as you're going through the painting or whatever it is that you're doing, it could look a little bit off. Now, that's not always the case. There could be some stylistic choices made that, if you're doing flat colors, or, you're not doing colors at all and you're just doing, line art, you're not going to really see that, or you don't have to communicate that. You are just communicating instead that, like, hey, this is water, and that's fine. We're kind of covering for the purposes of like painting and such. All right. So So we know because of the vanishing point, the horizon line, everything we're looking down upon, that's refraction. So when I am doing the study of this water, I want to make sure that I'm keeping in mind that there are going to be sections that I am seeing down into the water. Okay. So now let's talk about other types of reflections called caustics. Let's get a new layer. Bring this bad boy down. Okay, caustics. If you haven't heard of caustics before, it is essentially just light that is reflected off of a curved surface, whether it's, like a rock, nature, object, whatever. It's light reflecting on a curved surface. So these bits of light that we see here, these white specks, what's happening, these are caustics. This is water that is now kind of, curved or going at an angle, flowing. So we are just seeing reflected light in these little parts, and they're kind of all over the place. It looks like a whole bunch of noise. So these caustics I'm keeping in mind because they're going to help me by showing movement in the water. These caustics happen in showing like the direction that water is moving, because of the way that the ripple of the water is going and how the light from the sun or whatever is reflecting off of that ripple, so that curved water surface, and reflecting into your eyes. So those are caustics. To go along with that, I am noticing in certain areas we have kind of buildup of really dense kind of water, as far as how things are looking and how I'm going to interpret the water. These areas here, there's a lot going on with the water coming down and getting all sloshed around in this area, kicking up things. So these areas here, I'm not going to be putting a whole lot of detail in. I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of reflection work in there. This is a lot of area where it's just going to be, the texture of it is just going to be like a mass of water that we'll be able to kind of play around with. It's where the water is moving, I would say probably the quickest. They're just creating kind of a crazy texture. Anyway, so those are caustics. That is texture for the water that is moving really quickly. The last thing that I want to keep in mind, that I want to observe, is the color. So for those of you that know me and my work, I love to put a whole lot of color into everything. Just really play around and see what we can get in trouble with, as far as like just shoving a whole bunch of paint and stuff and see what makes something pretty. So when I'm observing this, I'm trying to find out like what are really the different colors that we're seeing in here that are going to be different from what our brains or our minds automatically think should be attributed to something specific. What I mean by that is, so when you're younger, or if somebody asks you, hey, what color is grass? You're going to say green. That's probably going to be the first thing that comes to mind. If somebody says, hey, what color is water? You might just say blue. And these are not necessarily wrong, but there is more that can go along with it. And that's why we observe nature and see what colors we can find. Can grass be green? Absolutely. But it can also be yellow, orange, a whole bunch of different colors. Now, there's a whole lot of moss going along around here, but it's not necessarily green. So how things look, especially in the sunlight, they're very warm. This moss on this rock or this surface, it may be, green if we were up close to it, but the way that the sun is reflecting off of it, let's kind of do a little bit of a color pick here, and that's more yellow. We have some more, oops, yeah, I did the color picker and then I got rid of my color. Gosh dang it. All right. So we got, some more, let's see, kind of color going along right about back here. So we may say, okay, well, we've still got some like green leaves and there's dirt back there, I'm sure. There's some trees. If somebody asks you what color are trees, you might say brown because of the bark. And again, while that may be true to an extent, that may not be how you should be interpreting color in your piece. So we have all of this back here, and this is not really brown, and it's not necessarily green. We're actually getting more into like darker grays, and while we are painting something like this, we could actually probably bump that more into cooler colors like blues to put back there. Just give it a little bit extra pop. But anyway, when it comes to water, again, instead of immediately thinking, well, water is blue, we're instead going to think about water is actually clear. Well, for the most part, it is clear. And the colors that we see when we look at water, whether it's like a lake or a river, stream, what have you, we are seeing the colors of what is being reflected off of the surface of the water, or we are seeing the colors of things that is refracted, so things that are underneath the water. We're seeing the color of those things as well. So for example, in this here, let me get rid of these other bits, clear up the photo a bit. The water in this area here is not blue, but instead we have greens and browns. So we can color pick there, and we see we're kind of getting in some browns, we're getting in some yellows, getting into some greens. So we are seeing this mass of color, greens and yellows and such in the water, again, because of what we can see through it, and possibly what is also reflecting off the surface. But we do also have some blue. The reason why we're seeing blue in other areas like down here and over here is because it is reflecting the sky color. So there's light sources that come from all over the place, light sources from the sun, but the sky is also a bit of a light source. It is still going to be, you're going to have things that are reflecting the color of the sky. So things that are not directly in the sun and like receiving immediate sunlight, like this area here, a lot of this is receiving sunlight. Things that are not immediately in the sun, but it's still daytime, you're going to get all of this blue in here from the sky reflecting off of it. You'll see that in shadows and such as well. So these are just some things to keep in mind when you're doing this, or when you're painting, or doing whatever, when you're observing nature. Keep these things in mind. Okay. So that is the last thing that I want to talk about with the water specifically. Get rid of that, get a new layer going. Okay. When you're doing art studies, if you ever do them, then I suggest, if you are trying to improve, not necessarily improve, but if you're looking to get your art to look a specific way or whatever, or you're trying to understand the world around you better, I suggest doing studies. They don't have to be something that you're banging your head against the wall about. Try to have fun with it. And don't create a whole lot of barriers for yourself when you're doing studies. It's not meant to be perfect. So when I'm looking at this water, or when you're looking to do studies, try to be specific in your intent with the study. And what I mean by that is there is, this whole photo right here, and we've got rocks, we've got trees, we've got, a whole bunch of grass, just foliage, like a whole ton of stuff. That's not really my focus. My focus first is the water. So all of this green crap and trees and rocks and stuff, I don't necessarily care about those. I'm not really going to be worrying about them right now. I'm just wanting to be focused on this water and everything contained within it. And it doesn't need to be perfect. You don't need to make a one-to-one study of whatever it is that you're looking at. Just take what you need. But for our purposes today, we're going to be taking a look at how to paint this. All right, so before we looked at the through line, and we were looking at the direction and how everything's flowing with this water. So that's something that I want to make sure that I'm capturing in this study. I'm going to leave that there, create a separate layer here. I'm actually going to erase this out. So generally speaking, whenever I do things, I try to do it in values first as I sketch things out. I'm going to do more just getting things in color this time and deviate away. And the values are just lighting, so that's, grays and whites. You may hear people talking and doing things in grayscale. That would just be if I'm doing things in black and white, but we're actually going to go start with color today. Try to work through color and value at the same time. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to block out the general shape of this river. I'm going to do that in a, let's see. Let's do a kind of gray, desaturated blue. Yeah, that should work. If you're doing studies and trying to do things with color, my suggestion would be, if you're trying to figure out what the color of something is, first try to get as close as you possibly can to the color without color picking from the source, and just kind of eyeball it. Now, of course, if you are just struggling finding out what it is, there is nothing wrong with color picking. There's nothing wrong with color picking at all. The practice and the purpose of just trying to eyeball it and get as close as you can is just to help your brain, your eyes, just recognize color as it is and be able to just immediately kind of work with it. So we're going to make this zigzaggy motions. We're going to go down this side, that. Now, I'm not looking for it to be exact, but I do want to get the general shape down. Let's bring this down a little bit more over here. So up to the side here and then down and off. So as we know with perspective, we paint things that are further away from us are smaller. as things get closer to us and get bigger and bigger. So we're going to be working with that to start blocking in some larger shapes. Studies aren't, again, meant to be perfect. Just really are just trying to understand what it is that you're seeing. So however best you can do that. But I'm not going to get this immediately perfect, but that's all right. See, it kind of goes off to the side here a little bit, circles back around. Let's get a little bit more going on down here and down here. And so we're blocking out the color, kind of a mid-tone. A mid-tone is a value, or the lighting that is in between your lightest light and your darkest dark. So we're just trying to get just kind of a middle lighting, middle color, middle value in the hue here. Next, let's try to block out in this large shape that we have here. Let's figure out the color of the area of the water that is being refracted. So again, that's the area in the water that we're able to more see through. It's not being reflective too much. We can actually see more towards the bottom. So we talked about before, it is pretty green. We have some darker colors, some browns, some yellows. So let's go back into our browns, yellows. I'm going to start with more of a desaturated. Right about here, desaturated color. Don't be afraid. Again, if you need a color pick. But if you're just trying to figure out the color of something, pick a color and just start putting that color right down next to whatever it is that you're trying to get. This is pretty close. We can do a little bit more saturation. Yeah, that's pretty close. So let's get this area right, so down. Let's say this is right about here. So we're just going to paint in this color. A thing that you can do, and I usually have on, but I don't for right now, in your art program, whatever it is, if you are trying to do painting in color, there's this fun little selection called Color Dynamics. And what Color Dynamics does is it will, jitter the hue, saturation, the brightness, or the value of whatever stroke it is that you're doing. That jitter, what it means is that it is going to be fluctuating, I guess, between like a range from the hue that you have selected to anything around it. So I have my hue jitter at about, let's do 10%. Saturation jitter about 4 or 5%, that's fine. So as I'm making these strokes, the hue, the saturation changes a bit. And this just helps you get some different strokes and some variation in your strokes while painting digitally. If you've ever painted traditionally or, mixed with color and stuff traditionally, you'll notice that, color, it does fluctuate as you're mixing it and putting it onto a canvas. This color jitter, this color dynamics way is just kind of a closer way of getting to that feel of traditional paint mixing and the variation that can come with it. It's not perfect, of course. You do have to play around with it, see what you're comfortable with. You want to be careful with it because you don't want it to look too crazy. So for example, like I like to keep my hue jitter low. I don't want it to be up here super high, because then like the color's going to start going all over the place and it's not going to really make a whole lot of sense. So keeping it low will keep its range pretty close to the original hue that you pick. So again, we're going to go back down to 10%, about 10%. And we're just going to kind of lightly make some strokes, paint in some certain areas. Hey, Blaze, welcome. So we're making just kind of general shapes in here as we figure out where this refraction is happening. Get some general color down. Again, just be careful as you're observing things. Keep note of what it is you're seeing. Try to get close. You don't need to be perfect. Studying is about just kind of having fun and interpreting the world around you. It's not supposed to be stressful. It's like a puzzle you're just trying to figure out. These are the general areas, I think, from what I can see. As you work through art, things are going to change. That's fine. From your original sketch and whatever you're doing, just kind of go along with it. See where everything takes you. Okay, since I got the general through line down, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that so I can see more of the image without all that red nonsense going on. Okay. Get some more going on down here. Right. For the pretty intense bit of water where the water is flowing quickest, let's go ahead and block out that. Now, the area where the water is rushing the most is, the lightest area. We can get pretty light with that. Let's see, let's not do too light. Let's make sure that we're staying within that kind of middle halftone as much as we can. Yeah, you know what, that works. Let's block out that. So it goes up and around. Now, a lot of that back here in this background is pretty similar in brightness or in value to things that are closer to us. Again, as things are further away from us, especially with water, things being on a shallower eye level, we're not really going to be seeing any of that refraction way back there. Excuse me, it's mostly going to be reflected light, and with atmospheric perspective, it's going to eventually get to a point where it's like there's not a whole lot of change going on back there. So we're not really paying attention much to like, oh, what kind of rocks are going on underneath the water back in that area. It's mostly just like the sun, the light is really reflecting off back there. And that's the majority of what we're seeing. Okay, let's do this here. We're just trying to get some general colors down. And then we have a section as it kind of goes down into here. Some more spots over in this area. And more spots going on down here as it goes here. Something I had to learn early on when I was painting or just being an artist in general is all art has a a rough stage. Some people call it the ugly stage. I don't like to say the word ugly, because I don't think that art really can be, or that ugly kind of insinuates that something might be bad or something, but there's no such thing as bad art. But anyway, so yeah, there are stages in your art that's going to look rough, and you're gonna be like, I'm doing this wrong. Trust in the process and keep on going. It will eventually work out. Okay, so we've got those kind of areas blocked out. So the next thing that I'm going to focus on is the topography of this river. So, water flows on a surface. That surface could be ever changing. It doesn't have to be flat. There can be a lot of things going on there. So when I'm talking about the topography of the water flow, I'm talking about, what's going on underneath? Like, at least there's rocks that are creating these little rapids of water underneath. So I am going to be drawing in or painting in kind of these rocks and the shape of them. The water is going to be rushing around and over. Erase all that. Again, we know because of the horizon line that we sussed out before. Again, we're going to be looking down on many things. We're not going to be seeing the underside of a whole lot of stuff. We are going to be seeing the sides of these rocks, things that are facing towards us. And we're noticing that the surface of a lot of these are sloped towards us. So we may be seeing the surface of some things more than others, and that's fine. Try to capture that as best we can. So let's do... Again, we're going to go for that halftone. And I'm seeing that, yeah, there's kind of some pretty dark spots going on through here. Let's get into the blues. But let's desaturate the blues a bit. See how that works out for us. It's not quite dark enough. Let's make it a little bit darker. Keep in mind that with art, again, it is interpreting the world around you. You'll learn that sometimes what may be correct as what you see in real life does not necessarily translate to what looks good in art. So everything is about looking up, observing, painting something down, stepping back, analyzing it, see how it fits in the whole of everything, and going back and working it more. So let's see, I got this darker color. I'm just going to go ahead and make a new layer. And we're going to figure out these rocks. So we got this shape over here. Let's do it. So here. So going on here. Try to do large shapes as much as you can. Large shapes, break them down into smaller shapes. We'll work on the side of this river a little bit as well. So I'm not trying to get a whole lot of detail in at this moment. We're just trying to understand what we're looking at. Brush a little bit bigger. Again, we talked about before that we're trying to make sure that these perspective lines or natural perspective lines are, they're going more towards the vanishing point, and as things get more towards the horizon, that vanishing point, we have more horizontal lines. But the closer things are getting to us, those lines are a bit more diagonal, whatever, not horizontal. Okay, let's see. As things are getting close, let's get a little bit darker. Got it. So rock, that might be a little too dark. So we have this massive rock. Again, we're thinking about the topography. We're thinking about what's underneath and what is around the water. So we've got this kind of motion here. Got another big shape here. We have this pretty large shape here. Goes off of photo. As things get closer to you, things are more saturated and darker. So I want to keep those things in mind. As we paint through it. See that, okay, there. We've got some more rocks going on here. We have this kind of shape going on down here. And more of this shape. Back that up a little bit. Bun shape going on there. Let's get some more of the side going on. We're not looking to put a whole lot of detail. We're just making big old shapes. Detail can come later if we decide we want to get that. You know, and the your study and how you want to interpret things, just take it as far as you want to go or you need to go, however much you need to be able to understand what it is that you're looking at. Be sure that we are overlapping shapes in the foreground against those that are in the background. Helps us create depth again. Try to avoid tangents as much as possible. Okay, so we're getting a little closer. Let's do this here, get that. Okay. Now, you know, again, take the study as far as you need. It is, you know, just be intense in your studies, be specific. I'm going to be taking this pretty far, again, because I'm wanting to go over how you can paint this kind of stuff. But, you know, if you're wanting to just say, all right, well, my intention with this study is really just to get a flow or like get some shapes down for water, understand how it can go from you know, the background to the foreground, understand kind of perspective and such, you could stop it right here. And you know, that was your study, and that's totally fine. But just take it as far as you need or want to take it, especially if you're having fun with something. You know, take as much time as you want with it. Studies aren't necessarily meant to be something that takes a long time, but at the same time, take as long as you need. There's no rush with anything. It's just about you learning and having fun with the creative process. Right. Now that we've blocked in a lot of the shapes and kind of halftone colors here, now at this point, I'm going to start getting a little bit more specific and then start to add more texture and things. So let's get another layer going. Try to use many different brushes when you are trying to get a lot of texture down. You don't have to, of course. Again, take everything that I say with a grain of salt. The way that I am talking about things, this is how I approach art. I'm not at all saying that this is the one and only be all end all way. There's many different ways that people approach these things. They are all correct. This is just how I do it. So if you are seeing this process that I take and how I go about things and you don't really agree with it, or it's just not something that you're like you can do, or like it doesn't work with your process, that is totally fine. So you just do whatever helps you the best, whatever you have the most fun with. All right, so I've got a new brush. And again, talking about that topography, excuse me, I'm going to be focusing more about what is underneath the water before I actually start trying to paint the texture of the water. Things like caustics, so these little bits of reflected areas and such, that's what I leave for the very last. So first thing that we're going to be doing is we're just going to be taking these colors. We're going to be getting some darker colors in there, some lighter colors. We're just going to take care of the topography, the underneath portion first, and then we'll get back into how you can create that water effect on top of it. So first thing that I'm going to work on is this section here. Okay, I see that we have some darker areas kind of indicating things are a bit deeper. Just going to start color picking from what I've got and moving around my values a bit, moving around the hue a bit. Just start putting in some shapes, colors, being pretty loose with what I'm putting down. Again, we're not really getting into like super fine detail at this point. We're just adding on layer by layer the different things that we observe. And it can be hard to not immediately go into detail. I totally get it. That was something that I not necessarily struggled with, but had a hard time not doing at the beginning of my artistic journey. You don't want to get immediately into detail because you're just going to get kind of stuck in one area. You want to move around the canvas. Just color pick as we go through. Start softening some edges, make other edges a little bit more hard. Sharp edges versus hard edges is a harder edge is kind of like what we have here, whereas there's a very clear delineation between these two values. A softer edge kind of blurs the line between them a little bit. So just wanting to keep these things in mind as we're working through them. I try my best not to like erase or control Z as I get into the actual like more painting portion, just because you can really paint over things. And sometimes you get, as Bob Ross would say, happy little accidents of interesting shapes and colors of things as you work around and not erase and undo things that you've done. Yeah, we're just going in and refining our flow a little bit more, getting some of that darker color in there. Not painting the whole forest, so I'm not really worried about capturing every little detail. This needs to come down over here a little bit more. Darker color going on in here. Remember how the things that we kind of perceive in our mind is not always what is true to life. Again, if you are asked the color of water, you immediately think blue. That's not always the case. So be open to using a whole lot of different colors in things. And you'll find as you work through colors and match with stuff that you can get certain colors to look like other colors or to read another way. So I'm seeing here that there is kind of a waterfall effect here as things are coming down. So I want to make sure that I capture that. How is everyone doing on this wonderful Thursday? How are you all doing? Hope you're doing well. Let me know if you have any fun plans for the weekend, as things are coming up. Let's get a little bit darker over here. Doing good, clocked out of work and vibing? Great. Glad to hear it. Well, I'm glad that you were vibing here with us. Appreciate you coming on by. Some art. Be a nice chill thing. Okay. Let's see, we got more of this kind of stuff going on here. A bit darker in certain areas. A little bit darker. Let's kind of make this up a little bit. So we actually have some lighter. It's right there. Here. Darker over here as it goes up. This area. Dark area here. Here. Let's see, let's take this. Darken this up slightly. That way. Right. Again, all we're really doing is just blocking things out, putting bigger shapes down. We've got some texture going on, but we're not really getting into the nitty gritty detail. See, so now that we have that, let's move on to, let's get some of the rocks that are above the water. Let's kind of flesh those out and realize them a little bit more. Get some geometry going on. So notice, I'm noticing as I'm looking at the image that we're studying from, the surface of a lot of these rocks that are above water, they are more in direct sunlight. It seems like the light source, so the sun, is coming at kind of like an angle like this. So it is probably getting to be about noon or maybe a little past noon. It's overhead. We can kind of tell this. We're not trying to get exactly perfect, but we can kind of tell this based off of these shadows that we see around these rocks here, and how the shadows of these rocks are being created here and here, over here. This is creating a shadow along this area here. So I'm going to try and keep in mind the direction of the sunlight as I am working over top and painting out these rocks and their form. A little bit more, make the brush just a bit bigger. So we're going to get more warm, more light with this color. So let's check and see. No, that's not quite right. It's not super bright, but this kind of also starts to come into your taste as an artist and what you like to see, how you like to interpret things. So this is getting kind of close, but a little bit darker. So mid-tone is probably about right there. Yeah, okay. Again, if you're unsure if the color that you're picking is, close to what you want, just try to pick a color, paint it next to your reference, and see how close you're getting. So let's kind of paint this in here. We're going to be moving things around as we try to understand the form a little bit. I like to be a little bit messy when I'm sketching things out and get a little bit abstract and pull things out of abstraction. It's what helps me kind of see things or understand things the most. So I'm kind of just sculpting stuff in front of me. Okay, as we get kind of further back there, more of it is kind of desaturated. So I've got these desaturated colors coming on through, like right here. Trying to make sure that we're using bigger strokes. I often forget to do that myself. And again, bigger strokes. You want to go from big to small. View out more in the long run. I know that this isn't exactly how things are, but that is okay. Again, we're just kind of interpreting. Some rocks kind of going on back there in the back. Some stuff. Can kind of barely see the top of this rock. This area right there. And it's all about playing around, seeing what works. Might not get it right the first try. That is okay. Art is usually rough at the beginning. Just keep working at it. Keep playing around with things. We're looking into the shadow of this area. Again, things that are in shadow, they're still getting reflected light from the sky. So this area here, yeah, I would say that it's green, but it still has a little bit more blue to it. Kind of some desaturated blue, probably a little bit less. Use this to get that shadowy area in here. Just going to make some small little circular shapes to give the idea. Those rocks. And again, as things get closer to us, things are a lot more saturated, a lot more colorful. So we're going to get a little bit crazy, a little bit silly. This green. Touch too much, but you can always mess around with it more later. There. Yeah, it's about more what I want. See some kind of lightish areas here, kind of peeking through. Top of that, this ridge line here on that rock is a little bit brighter. So it goes down. Let's see. Okay, this rock here, still kind of warm colored, but desaturated. So let's see if we're close with that. Yeah, that's pretty close. Let's block this in. At least. Some just showing through over here. And we can see that this area that is wet down here, the rock is a little bit more blue. So we're going to go into that blue again, but desaturate it, kind of lower it in value ever so slightly. See how close we are. Yeah, pretty close. Let's create that line. There, like that. Okay. And then let's see. So we have some of that there, that over there. These rocks that are in the water are wet, so they're quite a bit darker, but they have that bluish color on it, again reflected from the sky. And we'll get to that in just a moment. Let's see, this color here is probably a, let's say, it's more gray. Maybe go more towards violet magenta. Just trying to approximate the color. So right there, kind of more gray. How do we get on that? Close. A little bit lighter. Yeah, that's about right. Just gonna paint in that. Shapes. Don't be caring too much about getting things perfect. Green, the mossy bits on top of it. Do this. Yeah. Again, some of these shadow shapes. Get some form down. Just kind of going back and forth with that color picker. Painting and color is all about pushing and pulling the shapes, the values, the hues, till you get about where it needs to be. So if it doesn't look right the first time, just keep working at it, and we'll eventually get there. Take this color, I'm going to make it just a little bit more saturated. A little bit more. Darken it ever so slightly. Put next to that. A little bit darker. Might be close. So let's get some of this. Bigger. Some of this in here. Can mess around with it a little bit. Bring that forward there. Bring this over here. Let's get a little bit more darker. Okay, yellow, green. Start making top of this. It's kind of patchy. It's all right. Just make some bigger shapes with it. Oh, I haven't saved in all this time. Ah, that would have been awkward. Let's see, 2024, did studies. This is a river stone. Is the 6th. All right. Okay, so I've got a lot more blocking out in, got some more correct colors as they need to be throughout here, or more of the correct like halftones. So from this point, I'm going to start rendering just a little bit more. We're still not getting like super heavy into the detail. We're not super still getting at like the water yet. We're still working on that topography. But we're going to be defining these shapes a little bit more and getting some more harder edges in there. So let's take this. Say this can probably be our darkest color. Yeah, I would say this is the darkest color. So a thing to keep in mind when you're working with shadow and light is that you want to establish what your darkest color, your value is, and be sure that you keep it that way. You don't want to go any darker than your darkest value, otherwise things are going to look a little bit off. And you don't want to go lighter than what your lightest light value is. It's all about that balance. But we're just going in here and fleshing out these shapes a little bit more. It's not supposed to be, again, super intensive. Just work things back and forth. Keep referencing your reference photo. Try to understand what it is you're looking at. Make corrections as you go or as needed. It's not needing to be perfect. Use this opportunity to make sure that your perspective in your shapes is as accurate as you can get it, or as accurate as what feels correct. Art is a lot about just kind of feeling things out. I'm keeping my kind of drawing of these shapes of what I'm trying to flesh out, make more specific. I'm still keeping my drawing fairly loose, painting of it, because it's what was I trying to say? I don't want my work to look too rigid. So keeping your lines and your painting and stuff as loose as possible. Help with that. We're just pushing and pulling everything. You may need to go back and adjust what your darkest dark and your lightest light is, and that's fine. As you're working on these studies. As long as you're learning, you're taking a lesson away from this. That's what's important. And again, it's all about interpreting the world around you. So don't be afraid to change what you see a bit to fit more towards your liking or how you see the world. We're not looking to copy our reference photos one-to-one. We're not trying to get it to look exactly the same, otherwise, there's no point in painting. We might as well just have the photo. So bring in some of your own character, your own personality into this stuff. Again, most important thing is just to be having fun with the creative process. And as we're working more towards the back, let's get a little bit more light, a little bit more saturated color in here. Don't want to make it too saturated because, again, as things recede away from us, they're more desaturated. That's why things off in the distance often look a lot bluer to our eyes. Atmospheric perspective often makes things further away from us look like that. So we just want to keep that in mind. Because as things go further back, I don't want to put something like super duper high green way back here, because that's just going to look way off. And it's going to disrupt the depth of the painting. Still want to get a little bit more color in here. Let's do this. See how that looks. It's a lot about putting stuff down. Again, observing, painting, stepping back, and analyzing what you've put down. Thinking through the whole process and thinking through what you're seeing help you develop the skill of just kind of understanding what it is that you're looking at. As best as you can, try to not use just straight black in shadow. Shadow does not, very rarely is it just straight black. Usually there's still a lot of color in there. It's darker color. It's usually a lot cooler, more blue, but it is there. Having things that are just straight black color or black without having any sort of color in it just makes it a little bland, can make it a little bland looking. And you want to create visual interest with your work. So add color, play with it as best you can. The more that you do it, the more comfortable you'll get with color, playing around with things. You will realize there are no limits, there are no rules, really. It's just what you have fun with, what your taste kind of ends up being, what you like to see. So we're gonna darken up a little bit more some of these areas over here. Get just a little bit more definition in the form. Start moving into the water, making things look like they're underwater. Saturation here. A little bit more. This definitely needs to have a little bit more light coming in. Add those. Things that are in shadow next to water. Again, we'll have things reflecting off the water into the shadow. So that bounce light. So things that are going to be bouncing off of the water into the shadows. Again, it's going to be a lot of that skylight. So you want to make sure that your shadow still has a bit of that blue going into it. These are things that you just learn through observation just in the real world. Always keep in mind that cameras, they do not take perfect pictures of exactly what we would be seeing with our eyes. So lighting may be off. Some of the shadows may be like way too dark, and some of the lights may be way too light. So as much as you can, try to paint and look at things and draw things in person from observation. Or if you are using photo like I'm doing today, just keep in mind that, you know, it's not exactly what we would be seeing, in real life. So adjust accordingly. Okay, so now let's get back into, let's get another layer going. Let's flesh out underneath. And let's get a little bit more blue going on. A desaturated blue. Just like that. Okay. So we're just going to get the shadows in the water. It's kind of the deeper areas that we can see. Just going to go through like that. You're working on a computer or digitally, and you are not quite feeling the colors or the saturation, or you need to adjust things a little bit, you can always adjust the levels, the value levels of things, or you can adjust the hue of things, saturation, the lightness. So a lot of these things you can kind of change on the go as you need. But try at first to just do it and paint things in by eye. Getting into adjusting things on that slider. Again, it's not necessary, like it's not mandatory. It's not something that you have to do. It's just, practicing and developing that skill for being able to see things. This isn't like how I would normally, do my paintings where I'm trying to get like a whole lot of detail and stuff because I'm a sucker for detail. And we are really getting impressionistic, and we are getting the illusion of detail by kind of controlling our shapes and our brushwork, our placement of things, our values, our lights and our darks. And we're just kind of getting to a point where we're doing what feels right. Again, what may look correct in real life does not always translate well to what looks good for art. Life is not always so even and pretty, and that's why we, as artists, interpret it to how our tastes and how we view the world, or how we want others to perceive it with us. If at any point, if things are not making a whole lot of sense, or you want me to go back and explain something else, feel free to let me know. I do these study sessions for everybody because I want to, want us all to build up our artistic skills. I want us all to create, have fun with these things, see what our creativity can bring out. So if I'm not explaining things well, or you're not understanding things, please let me know so I can try to answer, re-explain things a certain way. Because we want to build confidence, build our knowledge. Look. Again, what I like to do, talking again, is about painting things, observing, painting, analyzing, is I'm stepping back, kind of moving away from the screen a bit, and I am just kind of taking a larger look at it, see how things are coming together. I'm wanting to make sure that my colors and my shapes are harmonious, and that, I'm making sure that, whatever color or texture, whatever that I'm putting down, I'm making sure that its relationship to colors and such next to it work out, and that there are no kind of weirdness to it, that it reads well. So it's good to take time to step back and analyze what you've done, what you have wrought on this earth. It's all coming along pretty well, I think. So, let's see. At this point, let's start cleaning up a little bit more. So I'm just going to start color picking, moving around, start making more. Rephrase that. I'm going to start being a little bit more again intentional and clear with my shapes and less abstract. Well, even though this is impressionistic, and most art is impressionistic, depending on the style that you're going for and what you're trying to achieve, starting to make things look a little less abstract is going to help. So I'm just going to do that here and make things a little bit more clear. I'm not trying to paint every single rock, like underneath the water or anything, but I am trying to make sure that it is all cohesive and it makes visual sense and is appealing to look at. Change things up as needed. One thing I'm wanting to make sure that I do is I'm softening the edges of the rocks that are touching the water. I don't want like a super duper hard line, because that's not really how it works. Again, keeping everything loose. Still trying to keep in mind the flow of the water, make it feel real. Make it feel like water is supposed to feel like, as if we were actually there. Things that are like way out here in the background, I'm not super duper concerned with making detailed or anything. I'm not just going to kind of give it a little bit more shape. But other than that, I'm not going to fool with it too much more, because of how far away it is. It's not really what's important. It's important in getting that through line, that overall movement, but it's not important to get busy and make it super busy and fool with it too much. So we need to get some more green on these rocks here. Let's do this kind of color. It's kind of splotchy, so we're just going to go around and get loose with the texture. Let's be a bit more warm, more towards the yellow. Some lighter colors on the edges here that are getting hit by direct sunlight. Just make sure that those are showing like that. It's good. I'm backing up from the canvas, taking a look at things. We're just going to save it real quick. Basing it off of our reference photo to see how things are. Again, I know that it's not exact, it's not perfect. That's fine. Let's get a new layer. Okay, from here, let's actually start doing the caustics. Let's start getting more texture on the water flow. See what we can do with that. So I want to take, again, a mid-tone. And let's bring it down a little bit more. There's kind of more of a teal color going on in this water. So I'm going to take that kind of base color and start getting some flow and texture down where that water is probably running very quickly. And being loose. Try to keep in mind how the water would be flowing and how it's looking. So our brush strokes, our brushwork should be in the direction that we see the water flow, that we can perceive it as best as we can. So a lot of these areas where, things are kind of really cascading down and it looks super busy and like, wow, there's like a lot of texture, a lot of noise happening here. Just keep in mind that even though it looks just like kind of random nonsense that's happening, there are still like general shapes and direction that this flow is going. So when you're making the texture of these things, still keep in mind the direction of the water flow as you are putting down these shapes. more of this kind of teal color going in here. Just making sure that our brushwork is loosey-goosey. So we kind of block in some texture and figure out how the water is flowing. These kind of shapes going on here. Wonderful thing about painting or just art in general is, again, that illusion of detail. We don't have to make every little speck of water or every little rock, every little bubble. Just playing fast and loose with it. Okay, now that we got that, let's start adding in some more of these little caustics, like here-ish and stuff. Get a little bit more specific. And we're going to take this lighter color here and go a little bit lighter. And we're also going to go a little bit more towards our purples and magentas. Let's see how that works. A bit more gray. Desaturate that a little bit. So let's just... What I'm doing is I'm kind of doing like a little bit of a scribbly motion, but I'm doing it still in the direction of the water flow. And I'm still keeping in mind that, you know, there are kind of blocks of these things happening. I'm trying to just capture that. Doesn't need to be perfect with the texture, but we're just trying to get kind of close. Trying to insinuate, get that feeling of it. Start on this area here. Got some caustics, so some of the reflections happening back here. I'm gonna make note of that. Here. You can use different brushes to kind of speed up this process a little bit. I like making all of the individual little strokes and such, because that's just how I like to do things, but there are brushes that have a lot more of like a scattery, dotted look to it that can achieve a similar effect. You are free to use that. Free to do whatever you want to do. There's no wrong way to do art. You know, some of these look, they have a lot more harder edges, so what I can go do is run back through with like a smudging tool or something and just kind of blend in a lot of these colors and these brush strokes. So that way there's not like too many hard edges going on. Some bigger strokes over here. See this area where the rocks are super wet. Can have those caustics that shine to it. And from here, let's actually start getting into the lighter, denser areas. So, again, we've got the sun that is shining down and is a major light source. So I don't want to just do like pure white in this lights, or like in the lightest area. I want to have a little bit of warmth in there, just a little bit. And I still want it to look relatively normal against the rest of this. So that might be a little bit too light. Let's bring it down just a smidge. All right, new layer. Let's see how we get with that. That works. Okay. At this point, it is just a lot of building up kind of those lights. Still warm. And we're still wanting to make sure that even though it's kind of dense and we have a lot of these brighter areas, they're still following a general direction. As the water does follow. Stuff here. Okay, we can see there's kind of a hard line here. All that water is splashing into it, but it is a little bit darker and it goes into a little bit more brightness. So let's try to make sure we capture that. It's going down and around. And after we do this, we can still add some lighter spots as just like accents. Just keeping in mind the flow of the water. It's all about building up these layers of color, brushwork, and texture. As things get a little bit further away from us, we can again make things a little bit more blue. So atmospheric perspective. This area back here, we're just going to be making it a little bit more bright. Illusion of detail. Applying the detail. And at this point, it is just kind of a like it's just doing that final bit of like pushing and pulling the colors and your brushwork and stuff. But I mean, as far as the study goes, this is pretty much done. I wouldn't really need to take it much further, if at all, than how it currently is. But I'm going to keep working it just a little bit more. Make it a smidge darker. Let's get some highlights going. Going, clean up some things. A bit more color into these shadows. Say for right now, let's just get some accents, accent highlights. Let's actually do, is it this? Yeah. These areas here, kind of where there's a lot of these ripples and bubbles. If we wanted to get really fancy, we could put down like a color dodge layer. Let's see. And get some highlights in that way. Some nice colorful ones. Let's see, let's do this. Let's get down one last layer. We're going to change that layer to a color dodge layer. And I'm going to grab an airbrush. And we're going to choose a warm color, kind of like this, into the orange, red. Going to go middle. And let's kind of hit this with some lights in some certain spots. Get a nice highlight going. Yellow. Some of these edges around here kind of pop a bit. Just a few more places. Cool. Okay. Well, I think I'll probably just end that study right there. I mean, I could sit here and anybody could sit here and just work forever on this and actually like more render things out and get a lot more detail and foliage going on there. But that's not what this study session was really all about. But yeah, if y'all have any questions, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, this was just going to be kind of a short stream today, just to go over the study. But thank you all so much for joining me. Really appreciate you.